Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. And my co-host is Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. And I am Trudy Leong, administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Our very special guest for our spring 2023, our first show of 2023, is Larry Garfield. He is of Fair Vote, Illinois, and he is going to be discussing with us about ranked choice voting. Welcome, Larry.
Hello, world. Good to be here.
Well, first of all, Larry, how did you start working toward ranked choice voting, and how long have you been with Fair Vote Illinois? And of course, tell us a little bit more about Fair Vote Illinois.
So Fair Vote Illinois is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization based in Illinois. We've been around 3-4 years now. We officially chartered in 2020. And we are laser focused on advocating for and advancing ranked choice voting in Illinois. That's our only issue. We feel that there are many problems in our election system right now, in our political system. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And one in particular is the way we vote, plurality voting, which has a host of problems that we can get into. Ranked choice voting is an improved system of voting that we feel is a major improvement, and it's growing in popularity across the country. So we'd like to see it adopted more widely to make elections more efficient, fairer, more honest, and all around better for everybody.
So Larry, you said it's growing in popularity across the country. Which other states or municipalities are using plurality, are using ranked choice voting over plurality voting?
So the state of Maine has been using it for 2 or 3 election cycles now. The state of Alaska just adopted ranked choice voting and used it for the first time in 2022. There's around 50 or 60 cities around the country that have either adopted and used ranked choice voting or adopted and will use in their next election. The largest is New York City, is now using ranked choice voting, but San Francisco, Berkeley, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Santa Fe, and various others around the country, large and small, are already using it. It's also been used for a century in Ireland and Australia. So it's not a new concept, it's just taken a while to pick up steam.
So it's been tested.
Yes.
Isn't it also been recently used in Evanston, Illinois?
So Evanston just voted in November to adopt ranked choice voting. We'll be using it in our next municipal elections in 2025, which eliminates the runoff process. Evanston, like most cities in the area, has a nonpartisan election where we have a initial election, and then if there's no majority, we have a runoff election. Although in Evanston, they call it the other way around. Depending on the number of people running, there may or may not be a primary beforehand. It's weird, and whether or not there's a primary varies based on details, and depending on what happens in the primary, the general election may get canceled. It's a mess. And in November, Evanston voters voted by 82% overwhelmingly to jettison that system and adopt ranked choice voting instead for municipal elections. So instead, we'll have one election in April of 2025. Whoever's running is on the same ballot for mayor, city council, and city clerk. And voters can just rank their preferences, and they're done in one day, and that's it.
So this will remove the runoff election, which is a
Correct.
City of Chicago tradition for so many years. What are the pros and cons
Of runoffs or ranked choice voting?
Removing the runoffs with ranked choice voting?
So there's a couple of advantages. Nice simple one. Chicago spent $3.3 million on the runoff election in 2019. What else could Chicago do with $3.3 million? The mind boggles. From a democracy standpoint, the problem with a runoff is, especially when you have 14 candidates running like you had in 2019, or 11 candidates as there are for mayor this year, or there's some aldermanic districts that I think have 20 people running for a single aldermanic seat. No one's getting a majority. That's clear. And there's not even a good sense that the top two are actually the candidates that have the broadest base of support. So even with a runoff, you still, as a voter, have to think strategically of, okay, I like this person, but I hate this person, but the person I like, they're not that popular, I think, so I should vote for the person who I think is more likely to beat the person I hate. And that's just terrible for democracy. And having a runoff doesn't really fix that unless you only have 3 people running, which, Chicago has a lot more than that this year. So a runoff doesn't really fix that problem. Ranked choice voting fixes that problem.
What other problems does ranked choice voting fix?
The big problem with plurality voting is, what we use now. One of the big ones is strategic voting. Like I just described, where voters have to think about, I like this person, but this person is more electable, I think, and try to guess what each other are doing, and that's bad. Another problem is, because of that dynamic with the current voting system, as a candidate, your goal is not to get 50% support. Your goal is to get more votes than any other individual candidate. So if you have a broad field with 4, 5, 6 candidates, it's really easy for someone to win with 30 or 40% of the vote. And if there's no runoff, as there often isn't, then you have someone elected with 70% of voters saying not that person, but they still end up as the winner. Ranked choice voting, that problem goes away. And so as a candidate, your incentive is not beat down all the other candidates, especially those most likely to pull votes from me, so the most similar to me candidates, but instead reach out to as many voters as possible. If I'm walking down the street as a candidate, going door to door, and I see a sign for my opponent, right now, I'm not going to talk to that house. I'm not going to bother. If we have ranked choice voting, it's worth my time to go talk to that person as well and say, okay, I know you like so-and-so, that's fine, but I'd love to be your second place choice. It encourages candidates to reach out and collaborate with each other. This is something we've seen in New York City. We saw it in Maine, where candidates would endorse each other and put out joint campaign ads because they were close on issues. So it'd be really great if they can collaborate and support each other rather than fight each other and fight the people who agree with them the most, which is what the current system encourages you to do.
Have you had instances in which the candidates have done that, actually collaborated?
Absolutely. In Maine in 2018, Mark Eves and Betsy Sweet, who are both running for governor, put out a joint campaign ad in which they said, we agree on 98% of the issues. So vote for me first and her second, or for me first and him second, because it was more important for them to support the issues and the concrete changes they wanted rather than just fighting each other. Contrast that with the 2020 presidential campaign as an example. However you feel about any of the individual candidates, you had Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who were very close on most issues, but they and their supporters kept attacking each other and saying, oh, you need to drop out of the race because you'll just split the vote. And no, you should drop out of the race because you're just going to split the vote. And what happened? They split that vote. They split the progressive vote. So wouldn't it be better if the incentives were such that they were encouraged to work together and put out joint campaign ads, as also happened in New York? Several of the mayoral candidates in New York City endorsed each other, saying, hey, vote for me, and then this other person second.
So
that
in a race
not
where...
only makes a nicer campaign, but tends to elect people who want to work together rather than people who want to vilify others.
So in a race where it's anybody but the incumbent didn't do anything, the incumbent was a lame duck, the incumbent did more harm than good, promised a lot of things during the election and is a one-termer. So in that kind of thing where you have two other candidates who may differ from each other, but it's an anyone but this person race, So ranked choice voting would benefit that?
Absolutely. What happens now is, you have an incumbent who, people hate for whatever reason. You have 2 or 3 people running against them. They split the anyone but the incumbent vote. And so the incumbent gets 35, 40% of the vote, but that's still more than the others, even though 60% of people voted for not the incumbent. And this is true whether we're talking about an incumbent candidate or not. So I'm not just against incumbents here. Mm-hmm. But with ranked choice voting, as a voter, I can say, okay, I hate the incumbent. My preference to replace the incumbent is Bob. All right, I'll mark Bob as my first choice. If Bob doesn't win, that's okay. I'm okay with Alice. I'll mark Alice as my second choice. If Alice doesn't win, all right, Jane is my third choice. And this way, when we go to count the votes, we look at everyone's first place vote first, and that just at your first place vote. And if someone has a majority, great, they win, we're done. If not, eliminate the last ranked candidate. Let's say, I'm the only one who likes Bob, so Bob gets eliminated. So now my vote transfers to Alice, and it'll count for Alice instead. So I always have one vote that's counting at a time. Someone who voted for Alice in the first place, their vote doesn't change. They're still voting for Alice. But now I get asked, okay, if you can't have Bob, who are you next? Who's your next favorite? My next favorite is Alice. All right, so now your vote counts for Alice. So now do that again. Count, does someone have a majority? If not, just keep doing that until someone actually has a majority.
So how do you feel that that plurality voting is not fair? It's the other side of the coin of what you just explained, but are there different ways that non-plurality voting is not ideal?
The big one is it encourages and allows for non-majority winners. This is something we see across the state, especially in primaries. Illinois is very gerrymandered, so we have a lot of districts that are solidly Republican or solidly Democratic. And so the real election is the primary. And in the primary, you could have 4 or 5 people running. Someone wins that primary with 30% of the vote of just the people who voted in the primary for that one party. And then they sweep the general because of where they are. And then no one wants to run against them from their own party in the primary, so they have the job for decades if they want it. And then they retire, the seat opens up again, and you have another 4 or 5 people run because it's a guaranteed job. And someone wins with 30%, 40% of the vote, so maybe even less than that in some cases, and they then have the job for life. Plurality voting does that over and over again. It happens, I believe, 9 times just in the June 2022 primary for congressional races in Illinois, not even counting the state legislature. 9 times we elected in the primary a candidate who did not have a majority support even in their own party. This is not giving us good candidates. It also means that as a possible candidate, I need to look at not just, do people support what I have to say? Do I feel I have a chance? But also, if I run, will I end up hurting someone who I also kind of agree with? And so very often people are discouraged from running because they don't want to be a vote splitter. And that's bad. That steals candidates from us who could be very good candidates that we don't have access to now.
And so how about third-party independent parties? How does this impact them?
In much the same way. Currently, that strategic voting problem is what keeps third parties from being viable. If right now the Green Party got very popular in a district, let's be honest, their biggest impact would be splitting the vote from the Democrats and then the Republican be elected. Even if a majority of voters voted for either a Democrat or a Green Party candidate, it'll end up electing a Republican. And the same thing the other way around. A Libertarian candidate, the only thing they'll really accomplish is splitting the vote from the Republican and end up electing a Democrat. And this is what keeps third parties from being viable, because they can't be too successful or they just hurt their own cause. Ranked choice voting eliminates that problem. If you want to support the Green Party candidate, go ahead. If they don't win, that's okay. You can put the Democrat as your second place choice, or put the Republican as your second place choice if that's actually your preference. You can do it any way you want.
How about elections with several options, such as the Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicagoland, or maybe the new Chicago police representative position that's coming out in this upcoming ballot?
There's a variant on ranked choice voting called proportional ranked choice voting that is useful for multi-seat elections. To the voter, it looks exactly the same. You go into the voting booth, you select this candidate first, this second, this third, this fourth, and so on. And then we run through the same process. However, instead of having a 50% threshold, the threshold is 33% or 25%, depending on the number of seats being elected. And then we do the same process with rounds, but we don't just eliminate the lowest ranked candidates. Once a candidate passes that threshold, whatever it is, then we can take a fraction of all of those voters' vote and count their second place choice instead. So even if everybody supports Bob first as their candidate, that means, okay, Bob has, of the first place votes, 70%. He doesn't need all that support. So voters who voted for Bob can still have part of their second place choice represented. That way you're not encouraged to say, okay, Bob's going to win, so I'm not going to vote for him just in case. You want to eliminate that problem. It's a little bit more involved on the counting side, but it's a standard process. And again, it looks exactly the same to the voter. So whether you're electing one person or two people or four people, you get a list of names and you rank them first place, second place, third place, and so on, and you're done.
Do you know if in the jurisdictions where you have ranked choice voting, is the Green Party, are third parties doing better in those jurisdictions? If you have any insight on that.
I'm not sure. I believe a lot of the jurisdictions that have ranked choice voting are nonpartisan. So, yeah, I don't know what people's party affiliation is. It's going to take some time for people to get used to ranked choice voting and being okay with voting for the Greens or the Libertarians or Reform or whatever non-major party. And there's also in Illinois the problem of ballot access, which is a related but separate issue that also needs to be addressed. But it's a separate matter. I will say both the Green Party and the Libertarian Party of Illinois have endorsed ranked choice voting. So both the Green Party and Libertarians agree on very little, but they agree on ranked choice voting.
What about the Democrats and the Republicans? What are their views on ranked choice voting?
Mixed. Looking across the country, there are Democratic areas that use ranked choice voting. There are also more conservative Republican areas. So Alaska is using ranked choice voting now. They're hardly a bastion of liberal Democrats, but they're using ranked choice voting successfully. The Virginia Republican Party is now using ranked choice voting for its primaries, and they found it gives them candidates who have broader appeal, and so they're doing better than candidates elected under plurality. Meanwhile, you have liberal areas like New York City or Maine that have adopted ranked choice voting and are liking it there as well. So there's support from all over the political spectrum. I know in Fair Vote, we have Democrats involved, we have Republicans involved, we have Libertarians involved, we have Green Party people involved, as well as I believe we have some people from the Forward Party now. So it's a cross-partisan issue and cross-partisan benefits. The benefit isn't to any particular party, it's to the voters and the democratic process.
The Chicago Board of Elections and the Cook County Board of Elections, their board votes on how they're going to operate. Have you contacted them about ranked choice voting system?
I believe we did speak to the Cook County clerk a while back, and they were okay with it from what when we spoke to them. And we also verified that the voting equipment used in Cook County is capable of ranked choice voting. There's a software upgrade for it from the vendor. So they should be fine for running the ranked choice voting in Evanston in 2025. and any other jurisdictions that adopt it between now and then, which we're hoping there are a few that will adopt ranked choice voting in the next year or two.
For Fairfield, Illinois, how are they? How are you trying to get the message out? What are you doing to help implement more jurisdictions to get fair ranked choice voting? I know that there's voter education, lobbying. What else are you doing?
So we are primarily focused on voter education and outreach. The biggest roadblock to ranked choice voting adoption is people haven't heard of it. In my experience, I've talked to thousands of people about ranked choice voting in the past few years. More than 90%, when they hear about it, they understand it, they like it, they want to use it. But most people just don't know about it. And, oh, it's new, I'm not sure about this, so there's some trepidation there. So a lot of what we're doing is just getting people aware of ranked choice voting and comfortable with the concept. So we've run, we do street outreach, we've run events with practice ranked choice voting, rank your beer, rank your ice cream, that kind of thing. We also have spoken to a number of city councils and members of the state legislature to encourage them to support ranked choice voting in their jurisdictions. So technically we're not doing lobbying, but we are advocating with elected officials, and it's serving as an educational resource for them. Many of whom are like, I've heard about this and I think it sounds okay, but I don't quite understand it. So like, cool, we can answer that.
So for education and awareness, are you doing like advertising? Are you doing like public service announcements? What else are you doing? Are you partnering with any additional nonprofit organizations with similar missions to reach the critical mass of the voters in our populations?
Yeah. In Evanston, we partnered with Reform for Illinois, which is another nonprofit organization, as well as the Democratic Party of Evanston, because it's a very liberal area, so we partnered with them. In a more conservative area, we try to partner with the local Republican Party as well, or ideally both. We're also looking at other state-level partners. Nothing I can announce right now, but we are looking to build a broader coalition across the entire state. Our end goal is all municipalities in the state, as well as all state-level offices and federal offices. So Senate, Congress, state legislature, governor, lieutenant governor, comptroller, judges, the works.
So you're talking about having an elected officials champion the cause.
Yes. So as a logistic note, municipalities in Illinois, almost all of them can adopt ranked choice voting themselves by vote from their city council to put a ballot referendum on the ballot, and then the people vote on it, and if it passes, they adopt ranked choice voting. At the state level, Illinois doesn't really have a good ballot measure system, so it would have to go through the state legislature and be signed by the governor as any other bill. That can be done. There is a bill in the state legislature, or it was last term, we expect it to be reintroduced this term, that would apply ranked choice voting to all primary and general elections for every office that the State Board of Elections has jurisdiction over. So all the ones I listed before, including president. That would not go through a referendum. That would be adopted by the state legislature, passed by the governor, or signed by the governor, and we're done. Will it pass this coming term? I don't know. It'd be nice. Probably won't, but we're working on it. And it does have a number of co-sponsors already. We're hoping to increase that number and just build momentum, build steam.
Thank you so much, Larry Garfield from Fair Vote, Illinois, advocating for ranked choice voting. Thank you for educating us. This is D Tycoon Community Unity Now on CAN TV, Channel 21. Thank you so much, and have a good night.